What does the addiction do for you?
Addiction is an adaptation to pain rather than a disease.
The way I would define an addiction is that despite the short-term relief, it causes long-term harm. Things that go wrong with the addiction are obvious.
Whenever you look at addiction in and of itself, are you seeing somebody that just has some healing issues?
If we want to heal this addiction, what we have to do is...
Julian, you described psychedelic integration as a sacred return, a coming home to the body and heart. Can you elaborate on this concept and how it guides your therapeutic approach?
Absolutely. And before I get going, I just wanted to let you know, too, that my trusted companion, Miss Layla, is sitting next to me having a very comfortable nap. So if you hear some snoring or grunting, that's where it's coming from. And that's just in a baseline for all of our sessions that we have, where she's just here holding space and enjoying her time together. And there's that icon again. It's popping up on my end, but I'll just leave it.
Oh yeah, it looks like it's going. It's uploading, so I think we're fine.
Yeah, we'll call it good. Great. So this return to who we are. Right now, I think that the majority of people that I work with and the majority of people that I see around the world are having a very difficult time, a very challenging time just living life right now, just feeling okay in life, enjoying life, finding joy, happiness, connection. It's very difficult and challenging and painful, and it shouldn't be that way. And what ends up happening is when we go through pain, especially early in life, and we don't have the skills or the resources or the tools to navigate that pain, is we develop adaptations to going through the pain. We have these wonderful survival defense mechanisms built into each one of us. And typically, when we go through heavy amounts of pain that we don't know how to deal with, the adaptation is to disconnect from it. So, for instance, if I were to stress you out right now, Jason, to put you under a tremendous amount of stress, what options would be available to you? How would you deal with it?
Yeah, maybe some self-aware techniques, maybe try to run away from you.
Precisely.
Not be a part of anything that you are,
Precisely. So you can set boundaries. You can tell me, stop, don't treat me that way, don't do that. Or you could go away physically. You could run away from it, fight or flight. But what happens when those are not available to you? When you're a kid, for instance, and you're going through terrible pain like that, well, you go away mentally. You disconnect from the feelings that your body's telling you to set boundaries or to get away from this. And when that is perpetual, we build these adaptations that kind of stack on top of each other. So we have layers of adaptation on top of adaptation, of disconnecting from ourselves, from our emotions, from our boundaries, from our own expression, and from essentially the world that we live in. And so we go away and we get further and further away from this reality and from ourselves. And so when we start to do this healing work, is we start to recover who we were before all of that pain. And the word recover means to find something that we lost. So we find that part of us that holds on to the wisdom of knowing how to live a meaningful, safe, fulfilling, thriving life. And we begin to reconnect with that. And that is essentially the practice that we were talking about.
So whenever you look at addiction as adaptation, because this is something I think all of us have, whether, for me, I battled with food addiction, years ago, because that was what my parents would use to make up, after they would fight. So we would all go out. We were extremely poor. So the big thing was to go out to McDonald's or Burger King. And so that developed an addiction of any time I have an issue or have a problem, I'm going to go towards, junk food or food. And you've written that addiction is an adaptation to pain rather than a disease. What is this perspective shift in this healing process for individuals struggling with addiction? Because I think a lot of people that have addictions are like, oh no, I don't want to do psychedelics or have anything to do with that because I'm afraid of what it could do to me. That makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah. So there's two main schools of thought when it comes to addictions today. The first one is that it's a disease, that it's a brain disease, it's a genetic disease. It's actually a wonderful argument that says there's something wrong with you and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no cure for it.
Mm.
In other words, you're helpless, you're a victim. It's a way of saying that there's something happening that's causing pain or disruption or dysfunction, and you don't have to do anything about it because there's nothing you can do about it. The other school of thought is that it's a choice. And this is what our entire legal system is based upon. The idea that we're making a choice to be addicted and therefore we deserve to be punished. And if we're punished enough, then we could straighten out. And I don't buy into either of those.
Right.
It can function as an addiction. I'm sorry, it can function as a disease, but it's not a disease. As you just articulated, the way I would define an addiction is that it's any behavior that provides short-term relief. So there's a craving of it. And despite the short-term relief, it causes long-term harm. So there's an inability to give it up despite this long-term harm that you're experiencing. Short-term relief, long-term harm. Inability to give it up, relapse, craving, so on. Now that can be to anything. It doesn't have to be to substances. It can be to food, as you just articulated. It can be to relationships. It can be to sex. It can be to work. It can be to money, status, power, you name it. High adrenaline sports, activities, very high dangerous situations. These are all things that we can become addicted to. And so what I do when I'm working with somebody is the first thing I try to find when they're coming in with an addiction is, what does the addiction do for you? So the things that go wrong with the addiction are obvious.
Right.
I work with people and it destroys their lives. They lose their families. They lose their relationships. They lose their jobs. They lose all of their material possessions. They end up on the street. They sacrifice their health. It can end up in death. We'll sacrifice everything to maintain this addiction. So what is so good about this addiction? What is it doing for this person that they can find themselves in these situations where they'll sacrifice everything to maintain it? And I think that you just articulated very well that pathology right there. So when I was a kid, I was going through a lot of insecurity with my family. There was a lot of fighting. We were dealing with economic poverty, and we were impoverished. We were dealing with scarce resources, and the attachment to my parents was the most important thing. So when that attachment was threatened and there was a rupture in those relationships, the way we repaired it was through getting food. And so later in life, when I find myself finding any sort of pain that resembles the pain of losing my connections, which was the most important thing to me when I was a kid, I go to food as the comfort to repair this. So here we can see exactly what the food was doing for you. Once we can understand what the food does or the addiction does for whoever I'm working with, then what we can do is try to figure out, how can we get those unmet needs that were underlying that pain? How can we meet those in healthy, constructive ways? How can we accept this addiction? How can we recognize and identify this pattern of it? How can we understand what this addiction is trying to do? And then, of course, how can we meet those needs in healthy, constructive ways? When we see it as this adaptation and we try to understand the pathology, the wisdom behind it, because what we always find here is that the addiction serves a purpose. It provides something. It helps us in the short term. And once we can really understand that wisdom, then we can comfort, soothe, and nurture that pattern and make choices and ultimately liberate ourselves from that old pattern.
Do you feel like because I feel like everyone has some form of addiction.
Hmm.
We always look at the word and it kind of becomes a taboo word.
Mm.
But I mean, like you said, it could be work, it could be, like for me, food, it could be, heroin. I mean, fentanyl, the extremes. Whenever you look at addiction in and of itself, are you seeing somebody that just has some healing issues that they need to work on? It's just kind of like the, like for me with the food, like you had said, it was something that I just knew that was easy. It was super easy just to go there, and then temporarily it solved the problem.
Hmm. Yeah, Jason. There's a view that comes around along with the addiction, which is there's something wrong with me. I'm
Mm.
doing something wrong. There's some issue at play here. There's something that needs to be fixed. And this right here is a sign of the trauma itself. So when we go through pain, especially as children, and the people who are causing that pain are the people that we're dependent on for survival. So our parents, our caregivers, our family, our community. In other words, the attachment is the most important thing to us as children. We can't survive without it. And when the people that we're attached to are the ones who are causing our pain, there's only a couple ways that we can view the situation that's happening. The first way is that my parents, my caregivers, my family, my teachers, whoever it is that's around me, they're not up to the job. They're not capable of caring for me. They're not capable of nurturing me. They don't understand what my needs are. They're causing this pain. In other words, I'm not safe. And for a child, that's a very hopeless outlook. And the road that that leads to is um, not one that they want to go to. So that's where the second belief comes in, which is that my parents, my caregivers, whoever, they actually do know what's going on. They're older. They've survived in this world. They have relationships. They have resources. They know how to function in this world. They know how to care for me. They know how to nurture me. The problem is that I'm doing something wrong. I'm not doing what they want me to do. So if I could do what they want me to do, if I could do it good enough, then I will get the care, the connection, the security that I need to survive. In other words, the problem is that I'm not good enough. And this right here is one of the fingerprints, the stamps, the most common, most painful responses to trauma, or perhaps one of the biggest traumas right there, is we've disconnected from ourselves and we've become very harsh and critical towards
Mm.
ourselves. And this is absolutely the case when working with addictions. The shame, the harshness, the self-criticism and judgment and evaluation. These are all indications of the early trauma and also the pattern of the trauma continuing today. We're stuck in that negative feedback loop and we're continuing to treat ourselves the way that caused the pain to begin with. So if we want to heal this addiction, what we have to do is look at our relationship to ourselves. How do we treat ourselves? How do we view ourselves? What do we do with our emotions? What are our views with emotions? So when I see somebody who has an addiction, I see somebody who was hurt very early in life and didn't have the skills, the resources, the tools, the connections, the support to navigate that pain. And so they adapted to it in the only ways that were available to them. That adaptation helped them, and now it hurts them. And if they're coming to work with me, there's a part of them that is completely aware of that, and they're aware of that part of them as well. And they're looking to reconnect with that on some way.
Do you feel like whenever you're working with trauma,
Mhm.
especially when it is in the body, And it's a physical thing. And we kind of always go to that, from the physical side of things. How do you incorporate somatic practices into your therapies? How do you help clients process and release trauma? What does that look like, from your end, the trauma that's stored in the body, whether it's been through abusive situations or addictions or whatever? How do you see that play out whenever you're giving therapy to clients?
Mhm. Well, can I ask you personal question, perhaps?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm an open book. So, yeah, I would love
Okay.
it.
When you were dealing with this food addiction and you were feeling some sort of pain, and then you were going to the food to soothe that pain, what did that pain feel like to you?
I think the whole I'm not good enough. And then we were raised in like not only super poor, but we were raised super religious.
Hmm.
So like fundamentalist, like Baptist.
Sure.
So it was kind of like guilty, 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 never good enough. So it was kind of like, well, basically, fuck it. If I'm super bad and I'm going to go to hell if I don't do these absolutely perfect things, I might as well just eat this, or I might as well just do this bad thing because who gives two fucks? It was kind of,
Yeah.
it was kind of like a fuck it attitude, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Sure, sure. So those are the perceptions, those are the things that are happening, and those are your responses to it. But what I want to know, Jason, is what did it feel like in your body? So when all that guilt, all that shame, all of that anger, that fuck it mentality is there, what do you feel in your body?
Like tense,
Mhm.
scared, fearful.
Okay.
My body feels like, like
Tense,
withdrawal.
constricted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Where do you feel it in your body?
Shoulders, back. I always had gut problems, when I would, of course, when you're eating bad, back then.
Mhm.
So it would always be like there and then kind of back, shoulder, neck, that type of area.
Okay, terrific. So we have tension, constriction throughout the body, your muscles growing in tight as you did this right here. Your stomach in knots, right? Is there some sort of weight or constriction in the gut as well?
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of more of like what eventually led into, I was eating so bad. It eventually led into, I'm like 50 pounds less than I was, but it eventually led into health issues,
Yeah.
but it was always that like gut,
Mhm.
dull, achy pain.
Okay, terrific, Jason. So now my question is, how long have those feelings been there? Or in other words, when was the first time you can remember feeling them?
Probably like 8 or 9.
Very early in life.
Like where I could,
Mhm.
really pinpoint it what it was.
Yeah. So just one other question is, when your parents were fighting and when there was the uncertainty, the volatility, the conflict in the family, what did you feel in your body then?
I wanted to run away.
Fear.
Fear. Yeah, it was fear, kind of like the shaky type feeling.
Exactly. So here we see fear is almost always stored in the body, in the stomach specifically. We feel a constriction in the gut. When there is conflict or physical threats around us and we have an anger response, our muscles grow tense and constricted as you did right there. Our heart rate starts to go up. There's all of these physiological responses. And here you just identified they've been with you since childhood. So those are the somatic signs, the feelings of the trauma still in the body today. So this feeling in the gut, this feeling in your muscles, in your back and in your chest, it's an indication of this pain from very early in life. So then the last question I might ask here is, what did you do with those feelings when you first started feeling them?
Usually you try to suppress, of course, like everything's going to be okay. I'm going to figure this out,
Yes.
or, we would make up and then go to the restaurant and then everything looked okay.
Okay, precisely. So you disconnect from it. You try to stuff it down, suppress it. And this is where the term eating my feelings comes in, because then we have all of this residual, unprocessed, unexpressed, unvalidated, unacknowledged pain that just happened. And the way that we adapt to it is through the short-term relief of eating something. So if we were going to work with this together, you and me, what I would do is I would help you to put your attention on those feelings that live inside of the body. And rather than suppressing them or disconnecting or distracting from them, what we'll do is we'll try to reconnect with them, and we'll see them there, and we'll spend time with them, and we'll ask some questions like, when you were first feeling this, when all this conflict and uncertainty was happening when you were a kid, what were the things that you needed? And the answer is usually pretty similar. I could take a guess here, or you could answer it if you'd like, whichever one you prefer.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, trust, safety.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's pretty basic. That element of being a child and, experiencing insecurity.
Precisely. Safety, security. So somebody to be with you, somebody to be attuned to you, to know what you're going through, to listen and see how their behaviors, how the circumstance that you're living in is affecting you, to see the emotions, the fear, the anger, the shame that's building from all of this, the pain, and to be attuned to it, to validate and reaffirm what you're going through, and ultimately to offer some comfort and connection and some soothing of this pain. And of course, to do this consistently. So that feeling that lives inside of you is the 8-year-old version of yourself, and probably even younger, because it was fully developed at that point. So the practice becomes putting our attention on that feeling as often and as frequently as we can. And then trying to give yourself those needs that you had that were unmet, and being the person who does it. So today, when you start to feel all those feelings, and then the inclination might be to distract from it or to suppress it or to soothe it with some behavior, whatever it is, instead of doing that pattern of the addiction, we can choose to meet those same unmet needs in healthier, constructive ways.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And we haven't even got into, and I want to get into this, the integration, beyond the trip, because, when we look at psychedelic integration and the effectiveness of it, I mean, obviously I just heard the other day from the Veterans Administration, Department of Veterans Administration, they were talking, that they are looking into, having psychedelic, for helping PTSD. And I was in the Marine Corps, so I can relate to that, understand that, was in Somalia, Bosnia, and Haiti, in conflicts. So, and I had, 13 of my friends commit suicide in the Marine Corps. So I understand the whole dynamic of it. Whenever I see psychedelic integration, it seems like there's this, because it's kind of, to some people it may be rogue, or there may be, this is fringe, this is hippie stuff from the 60s, 70s. Can you explain, what the experience leads to and how it can create lasting transformation?
Yeah. So when you described to me that you went into the military and you served in all of these high stress, very dangerous conflict zones, lack of certainty, volatility, unpredictability, danger. That's very similar to the exact same story that you told me when you were a kid.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
the same.
So that's not the original trauma. That's just a continuation of the exact same trauma that you experienced early in your life. So when we work with this, in terms of psychedelic therapy, we oftentimes think that the integration afterwards is the most important and the big thing, and it absolutely is. But what we would do long before that, for weeks building up to a psychedelic experience, is we would reconnect with that pain beforehand. We would identify that pattern that just presented itself. It's here right now, that part of you that's saying, hey, I'm here. I want to be seen, right? It's here. It's very easy to identify. And what we would do is, for weeks, we would build a practice of really connecting with that part of you, really understanding, why is it here? What were the unmet needs? As we just found just a moment ago, it came up like that. And then we would try to figure out how all this pain from the past is showing up in the present. and how it keeps leading us down these same familiar patterns that lead to more pain. And of course, we're going to try to figure out ways to meet those needs, those unmet needs in constructive ways. So it's a lot of practicing of, we can call it a meditation practice, if we will, or a deep focus on yourself. And so we'll try to connect with that part of you every day, multiple times a day. We'll try and get you to do that minimum 3 times a day, but ideally, try to do it all throughout the day, every chance you get. Just connecting with those physical feelings and trying to listen to them, trying to validate and reaffirm them. I see you. You're not alone anymore. You don't have to go through this feeling alone. Trying to be the person that you needed to come into all of that uncertainty and pain. Once we can really get that foundation rolling, which, the word psychedelic means, it's referring to your psyche, the immaterial aspects of yourself, your thoughts, your perceptions, your emotions, your beliefs. And then delic is arising or manifesting. So it's a deep connection to yourself. We've facilitated that throughout this call already, and we'll do that throughout our therapy. Then once we have this practice and we're already really connecting with ourselves, then we can use a deeper psychedelic experience as a tool to really go into pain that you carry around and comfort it, and soothe it, and connect with it, and listen and understand, and really open up to it, and be, again, that person that you really needed. If we can do that, if we get that practice rolling beforehand, the foundation underneath us, and then we have that type of experience, this psychedelic experience will, of course, bring things to your awareness, things that you might not have been able to see, but it also helps you write new patterns very quickly. And we'll refer to this as like neuroplasticity or neurogenesis, the writing of new neural patterns or emotional patterns. And that's exactly what we've been doing this whole time, of creating this new pattern of connecting and soothing and expressing and processing this pain rather than avoiding it. After the psychedelic experience, that practice that we've been working on, that has elucidated and become so clear, and that we have experientially been able to go in and engage with during that psychedelic experience, that's the new pattern. That's the new practice. Those are the new connections. Now what we need to do is continue to nurture, to develop, and help this practice mature, because there'll be lots of situations where you get activated, where something triggers that old pain and it gets very agitated. And that old pattern is like an old river that's had water flowing down it your whole life. It goes quick and easy. And it'll be in those moments where you'll say, this is my chance to do something new. So the psychedelic experience isn't just like this one-time fix, magic pill, everything gets better. But what it does is it really helps us to elucidate these patterns and to engage and connect with them in new, deeper ways, and ultimately to create something new. And it's a whole practice throughout the entire time, weeks, long before we actually work with any psychedelic. And then, of course, continuing it after. It's a lifelong practice. It's not the immediate. It changes, but we do get immediate relief almost every time.
Do you feel like, like when it's so funny, whenever you buy a new vehicle, where, let's say to Toyota Tacoma, all of a sudden you start seeing Toyota Tacomas everywhere you go.
That's right.
Is it kind of the same thing when you begin to, because that sounds scary for some people to have that, whether it's the shadow side of you or whatever you want to call it, that part of you began to emerge, that people have built sophisticated lattices around, to make sure that they are highly functional in a world, and I've seen that over and over again. I had a good friend of mine, he did ketamine, and it kind of blew out all of that he had built up for years and years, being a successful CEO.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that, like, is it just a fear? Is it a protective mechanism? How does somebody begin to get over the fear of wanting to do this type of therapy? Does it have to get to a point to where you're hurting so much, or is there a process of self-compassion where you begin to look, I am enough. I'm going to put myself first. How do you know somebody's ready for healing?
Yeah, a lot of questions there, and you came full circle.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. So the first thing you identified was that negative self-talk, the harshness, the I'm not good enough, I'm not deserving, I'm not worthy. And then you identified the adaptation. I became very successful, very functional. In other words, we identified the belief of I'm not good enough. And then what do you do if you're not good enough? What's the adaptation to not being good enough? It goes back to that same choice, the way of looking at it that we develop as children. Am I helpless? Am I a victim? Or can I be good enough? And so we spend the rest of our lives putting so much energy and attention into being good enough. And then we become addicted to status, to power, to respect, to being valued. But every one of us who has ever done that on some level knows if we stop doing these things, we won't be valuable again.
Yeah, that's so good. Yes.
Yeah. So that's always there, splinter in our mind. It's the pain continuing itself. And, well, I mean, it comes back down to the Buddhist philosophy, the Four Noble Truths. The first is suffering is inevitable. There is inherent truth in this world, and suffering is a part of it. The second one is there are causes to our suffering. In other words, we play an active, responsible role in the suffering. The third one is well-being is possible. We can make choices to liberate ourselves from those patterns of suffering. And the fourth one is here's the path. Go ahead and follow it. That's exactly where we're at with this healing practice. Each one of those fears, anxieties that you mentioned, each one of those was an adaptation to pain. And so I'm not saying, I mean, I absolutely see this. I do see very high powered executive people, doctors, lawyers, CEOs, you name it, international ambassadors, people who have spent their whole life in the pursuit of being good enough, and something clicks and they say, I don't need to do that anymore. I'm good enough for myself, and I'm going to show up for myself. And again, if we have a family, for instance, we have children, and we're in the constant pursuit of being good enough through external means. And so we're always working, we're always busy, we're always stressed, we're always distracted. What's the message that our children get? It's that they're not good enough for our attention. They're not good enough to receive our care, our connection. In other words, that same pattern, that same belief, that same trauma, if you will, has now become intergenerational. Well, it was intergenerational to begin with. We inherited it from somebody who also had it, and we have passed it on as well. So, you know, not everybody gets to that point where they want to address it and they want to focus on these things and they want to make the changes, but a lot of people do. And, you know, usually when I start working with somebody, we'll talk to them multiple times before we start the therapy. And when we start the therapy, you know, I go straight for the core of things. We're going to figure out what's going on. And, if they want to do that, if they're showing up and having these conversations, they're ready. There's a part of them that is ready. How deep they'll go depends on where they want to go with it and what they're willing to. And, you know, you don't have to get all the way to the very core the first time around. We can be gentle and compassionate and take our time with this. But usually when they come in and they're wanting to face these things and to do the inquiry and understand these patterns, on some level, they're ready for it. And there's a part of them that absolutely is ready, that is becoming known and really starting to have a say in what's happening.
Do you feel like it's the higher self that's kind of nudging? You know, what is that part, you know, because obviously the ego is the protective, you know, wanting to protect everything. And if you're never good enough, you know, I mean, that's me to the T. You know, I've had to work through a ton of that for years and years, decades. But what, like, is that the higher self nudging you? Is it a collective conscious? What do you believe that it is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When somebody heals from an addiction, we use the word recovery. We say that they're in recovery. And again, the word recover means to find something that we've lost. So if I recover my keys, I've found them after I've lost them. When somebody recovers from an addiction, what is it that they found? It's who they were before the pain caused the addiction, before they had to adapt to the pain with that addiction. So there's this part of them that is always there, that carries this wisdom around, that can never be broken. It can never be destroyed. It can only be disconnected. And we can always find it. And we call that lots of things, like your higher self, for instance. It's always there. So when you do this practice and you connect with that pain, then you see that 8-year-old self there who's disconnecting, right? To deal with this pain, you are a version of your higher self there who's reconnecting with this pain and comforting this younger version of yourself. This wise, whole truth of yourself is always there. It's always accessible. And those adaptations, those defense mechanisms, those survival mechanisms, as you might call an ego or a protector or a defender, yeah, those are just the layers of the adaptations. And we can peel each one of those back. We can cultivate safety. We can cultivate security. We can cultivate gentleness, compassion, presence. And the more that we do that for ourselves, the less of those adaptations are needed. And we can just peel back layer by layer until we get closer and closer to being just who we were before that pain.
Yeah, because I know basically the healing process is just a perspective shift, right? Do you feel like it happens in the mind? Obviously mind, body, soul, spirit. Like, what do you feel like the healing actually begins and starts in? Is it something that we think?
That's where it starts. So right now, with you and I having this conversation, it's very conceptual. It's all symbolic. It's mental. We're all up here. We're just talking about concepts and ideas and how this stuff works. And it's in this level up here, very superficial, skin deep. It's not very experiential. We're not feeling it. We're not doing it right now. We can come down into these deeper layers of experiencing, of being present, and following a practice of connection and attunement with whatever it is that we're looking for. In this case, connecting with ourselves. So when I start working with somebody, it's very conceptual and mental for the first half an hour, 45 minutes. And every session that we have will have some amount of the mental aspect as well. But the practice is going to be to come back into the body, to come down into those feelings, that tension in the gut, the weight, the constriction in the shoulders, the dry, choky feeling in our throats, so on and so forth, and to be attuned to it and to listen to it as well. So you told me, Jason, that you had this terrible feeling in your gut and you had to disconnect with it. Now, that feeling in the gut is there for a reason. When I work with people, I often ask, have you ever had a gut feeling that said you should do something and you didn't listen to it and then it turned out you should have done it? Our guts are, as modern science is really starting to understand, is an entire neural network. It's an entire brain in itself. And we have another one in our heart as well. And then we have the third one, the thinker up here. Yeah, we have to disconnect from these, because when it's sending us all these signals as children, I'm in danger, these are threats, I'm in pain, I need to express boundaries. But those feelings threaten our attachments, right? They threaten our connection with our parents in some way. We have to disconnect from them. Now, in terms of human development and human evolution, we have evolved to have these feelings, these signals in our body. We lived in nature all throughout the millions of years of human history up until very recently, the blink of an eye ago. We disconnected from nature. Now, if you're walking through nature, you're in the jungle, in the rainforest, and you're disconnected from your gut feelings, how well can you survive? You'd be dead in an instant. So this disconnecting from our guts is a survival tactic. But again, it serves us in the short term, but it causes long-term harm. So we start conceptually and we have to begin to reconnect with these feelings, these instincts, these signals from our body. And we have to process them and express them and build a relationship with them so we can really connect and understand why they're here and what purpose they serve. And the more that we do that, the more that we practice and develop that practice of connecting with ourselves, the more of a livelihood, a life that's in tune with who we actually are will begin to live. And this is the embodiment. This is the practice of taking these mental conceptions up here and really starting to bring them down into integrating them into our life.
Do you feel like psychedelics is the bridge for that? Is it allowing, is it facilitating that process?
So the therapy that I do is geared towards facilitating a psychedelic experience throughout the entire way. We can get to that experience through so many different means, through inquiry, through meditation, through reflection, through presence. You can get through it through sensory deprivation, through isolation. You can do a sun dance for 4 or 5 days in the blistering heat and push yourself to the brink of exhaustion. And then you'll have an incredible psychedelic experience, or you'll have it throughout the entire thing. You can go up in the mountains for 40 days and 40 nights, and then you'll hear the voice of God. There's so many ways to facilitate this psychedelic experience. Using a psychedelic substance is you get there just like that.
Mm.
And so throughout the practice, throughout the therapy, we're trying to facilitate that as much as we can. Everything that I do is to bring your attention back into yourself. And then psychedelic substance is this wonderful, incredible way of taking that conditioned mind, that inherent perception, the lens, the worldview of how we view ourselves and the world around us, and we can just put that aside for a couple hours. And all of those defense mechanisms that we've built up that tell us that feeling in your gut, that feeling in your heart, they're bad, they have to go away, push them away. We can let all of those patterns go, all of those defenses go, and it's much easier to do it in those few hours. And then, of course, you have the opportunity to engage with those feelings and to comfort or express or process or soothe them in ways that are not available to us through our regular default mode consciousness. So the psychedelic is a wonderful way. It's a tool. It's a resource. It can help us get very deep into the healing practice very quickly. And it can help us to see things that were not available to our perception because of those defense mechanisms. And we can uncover many more pains and patterns and perceptions that we might have taken a little bit longer, who knows how long, through other means to get to.
So do you feel like because this is so interesting to me, and I know there's a lot of questions like this, I mean, we're hard to living, this is a spiritual podcast. So is it different interdimensions? We go into machine elves, like there's all this stuff you can go online and read about, and people always have this question of, am I going to have a bad trip? Is this going to be am I going to be throwing up all the time or shitting all over myself? I think there's all these questions that are there. Do you feel like it's just all fear-based?
Well, depending on what psychedelic you're working with, that might be the reality. Each psychedelic has its own personality. It has its own traits. It has its own experience. I would categorize or describe a bad trip, as we call it, as one of two things or both things happening. The first thing is that we resist the experience. We try to enact some control over it.
Mm-hmm.
The psychedelic has very specific characteristics, each one of them. And almost every one of them universally, as again, it comes back to a deep connection to yourself. It's going to show you aspects of yourself. Those pains that we carry around, those painful patterns that we have that were the adaptations to the pain, the perceptions of the world, the self-beliefs that we have, all the things that are causing us constrictions, limitations, and pain, that is absolutely going to come to our awareness. Um, and depending on what our relationship is with those, we might continue that. We might try to resist it. We might push it away. We might fight it. We might struggle it. In other words, we're going to have a very stressful, difficult time. That's a bad trip. The other thing is we try to control the situation by saying, I don't want this. I want this over here. And the old saying is, if you want to make the gods laugh, you tell them how you think it should go. So the bad trip is where we are in conflict and we're resisting what the psychedelic wants to do. The way that we can mitigate this, the way that we can navigate this is before we work with any psychedelic, again, through the preparational therapy that we're doing, is we take that inventory ourselves. We start to launch the inquiry and we begin to figure out, what are the pains that I carry? Where do they come from? How did I adapt to them? How long have I been feeling them? What unmet needs are there? And we start to build the practice of relating and connecting and then doing something new. If we can do that long before we work with the psychedelic, when that pain starts to come up during the psychedelic experience, instead of it being this big, overwhelming, terrifying monster that's going to chase us around for 4 or 8 hours or however long, and we're going to try and run away from it. And, just like in a dream where you're being chased, your feet get heavier, you're falling into concrete, and the giant crab is getting closer. Rather than running away from this big, terrifying monster, we won't even see it as a monster anymore. We'll see it as that 8-year-old version of ourselves that's all alone, has nobody to talk to, is in tremendous pain, and is crying out in the only ways that are available to him. And instead of running away from that 8-year-old, we can say, come here. You don't have to go through this alone. We can see that pain not as this big, scary, overwhelming force, but as a part of ourselves, or as a trusted friend who's been with us since the very beginning. And we can connect with it and relate with it. In other words, we can allow ourselves to go deeper into the psychedelic experience. And if we can do that, then there is no bad trip by definition.
So you don't, it's usually resistance to, like you said, the gods or whatever. Do you feel from a spiritual perspective, it's like, I mean, obviously plants are medicine. Do you feel like it's bringing in something that's not unique to what our perspective is or what our dimension is? Like, where do you think the connection is coming from?
Well, if you go and spend time in nature, and I'm talking, not just like going on a walk through the trail or whatever, but you go and spend time in nature day in and day out, and you drink the water and you eat the food from the nature and you allow it to pass through you, and you spend your time there, not distracted by phones and by finances and jobs and tasks, but you really focus on what's happening around you. You'll begin to see that there are multiple dimensions of reality that are existing right in front of us, always. You look at the evolution of these psychedelic substances, like mushrooms, for instance, and you look at the evolution of humans, and we have co-evolved to have this communication where I can consume a mushroom and have this incredible experience where I can essentially plug into the network of this world, this reality that I live in, and I can tune into information about myself, about my ancestors, about the environment, about the animals and the fungus and the plants. It's incredible what we can tune into. So there's been, millions of years at minimum of co-evolution between these plants and humans to connect and to communicate and exchange information and to enact some sort of autonomy in how we navigate this world together. Terence McKenna famously said, don't follow gurus or sages, follow plants. I agree with him in some sense there, but not fully. But yeah, these plants, they're a part of the world that we're in. We have co-evolved together to communicate in very specific ways, like through a psychedelic experience. And I think that's very important. And I think there's a lot there. And I think our understanding of it, especially in the West, is elementary at best.
Do you feel like I know all these kids now are not doing as much alcohol. They're doing weed pins and all these things,
Hmm.
Um, uh, do, what do you feel, because I know I talk to a lot of people that get extremely paranoid, and I know it's just revealing who they really are. Do you feel it's detrimental to be addicted to marijuana like that? Do you feel like it's not an addiction? Where do you go with that? Because I see it so much when I talk to these younger kids. They're at work doing the pin, that's just become this thing, but then they're not, like my generation, I'm 51. My generation older was all alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah. Cannabis is an interesting plant. Um, on the one hand, uh, it has psychedelic attributes to it in the sense that it can really open you up, and it can show you things about yourself. I've certainly had that experience. And
Yeah.
um, it can be a wonderful, incredible teacher in lots of ways. And yeah, cannabis is also a plant that can easily fall into the realm of abuse in the sense where, just like you're describing, we become dependent on it. And if we look at, again, what are the things that it does for us? Well, it might give us a sense of safety, a sense of being able to relax. It might take our super busy, hypercritical, analytical mind and soften it for a little bit. So it gives us peace of mind. The question that I would ask there, just like with any addiction, is, well, why don't you have those things already?
Right.
Why does the cannabis have to give it to you?
Mm.
And so we can do our own work to address those root causes. Um, any substance whatsoever, even the psychedelics, which are by their nature non-addictive, they can be abused in lots of ways. And we can use what we would call spiritual bypass as a way to forgo doing all of this difficult personal work of getting to know the pain, engaging with it, relating with it, processing it, comforting it, soothing it, so on and so forth. And we can
So
just
I want to stop
keep
you, Jimmy. I don't mean to
chasing
interrupt
those
you.
psychedelic experiences.
Yeah, but there's a lot of this that's going on, and I've been kind of critical in that arena. It's like the hedonistic. We just do plant medicine all the time. I'm on my 27th journey, and then they're bitchy when we go to the restaurant and eat. Do you know what I mean? Like to the waiter or the waitress, or they've got all these mental health issues, but they've been on their 27th ayahuasca trip in Costa Rica. And they wear the beads and they have all the looks and stuff. Is that what you're talking about with the spiritual bypass?
Yeah, that's a part of it. You can go to meditation retreats where you'll have these experienced, lifelong Buddhist monks, and there'll be countless allegations of sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can go into the Amazon and you can work with an indigenous shaman who is abusing their power in those ceremonies. It absolutely exists, and it's very common to find it, unfortunately, these days. These are examples of people who have bypassed all of their own work. And it can very quickly become an identity where, yes, we wear the beads. We talk about how wonderful the ceremonies were. And we had the feeling of connection with the world around us and the universe. And we were, sitting with Mother Ayahuasca and all this stuff. And again, this comes back to that view of taking the psychedelic will fix me. It's a magic pill. And that is very far from the truth. I've known a lot of people who have gone through that. And I'll tell you, those ceremonies that they sit through oftentimes are not very easy and very gentle. They have very, very challenging times, and they ignore that. And that's the form of bypass right there.
I interviewed somebody that I don't know if you've ever used poison plants. I've done integration with different poison plants, but it was really cool to see kind of his process, because here's this poison plant that you're working with and it's creating the shadow side. and obviously you can kill yourself, and there's lots of different scenarios with that. And I don't know if you've heard of the poison plant, like integrations and stuff like that. It's almost kind of like a different branch of the psychedelic side of things. But one of the things that he said that I thought was really interesting is having respect. And a lot of times we don't have respect for the process because we always want to short circuit everything. So can I pay money and then can this thing be done? And then not understanding and having respect and humility for the whole process, if that makes sense. And that's kind of where I want to, because we're coming up on the hour, Julian, that's kind of where I want to go into. What does the process look like with you? I know you have a website, and we'll have that link below. And I know you're in Oregon, correct?
That's right.
What does that look like if someone wants to, work with you or get a hold of you? How does that process go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right about your first part. We have to have great deal of respect, caution, and care for this process. I've met a lot of people in, training workshops, therapy training workshops, and their pain is getting activated. And they say, I just want to go to Peru and drink ayahuasca and be done with this. And, oh, sweetie, that is not how it's going to work. You're going to have a very, very challenging, difficult time. And I don't mean to say sweetie as in like any kind of condescending way in any means.
No, of course. I understood. Right.
I'm just trying to, I know that line of thinking very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's 100%. Right.
Yeah. So we want to, we have to show the commitment, the respect. And it's not just the plants that we're going to work with, it's to ourselves. We have to make ourselves a priority and say, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to show up every day and go through this process, so on and so forth. It's very important. And I help people with that, of course. And I have had people who, they didn't have that, and they absolutely had the belief of this is the magic pill, this is going to fix it. And I try to be very clear at the very beginning. That's not how this works. And things will usually resolve themselves in that sense. In terms of working with me, the website, that's the best way to get a hold of me. There's a therapy request form and a contact form on there. So if anybody's interested, the majority of the people I work with do come from out of state. So they'll fly into to Oregon, and we'll work together for a certain amount of time. And we'll do all of the preparation work over the phone beforehand, and I'll be available afterwards, depending on how many resources and what their ability to stay here looks like. But some people have a little bit more ability, and they'll stay for a couple weeks. And depending on what they're looking for, I work with them daily, just really refining this practice of connecting with those feelings and building new patterns in terms of working with it. So yeah, website's the best way to get a hold of me.
I love that, Julian. I feel like this is much needed. And do you feel like, last question, do you feel like we're coming into a level of higher consciousness through humanity? Is there a shift that's happening? I know, like you said, millions of years, tens of thousands of years, humanity's kind of seemed, what do you feel is happening right now? Because it seems like everything's like, we're seeing higher conscious, but then at the same time, everything's kind of being torn down too.
Well, there's a shift happening, that's for sure. Change is always inevitable, and we're watching it happen at an exponential rate right now. We're watching all of these facets of our culture and society implode and collapse around each other. The very foundations of our culture and society are imploding right now. And on the one hand, yes, that can lead to some sort of higher consciousness. And I interact with people every single day who are helping facilitate this. People who are creating new paths and new ways for humans to exist and to connect with each other. And on the other hand, there is this pull towards darkness, which is always there. I don't know where this is going. I think right now we are in dark times, and given the trajectory, I think that we're going to go into darker times in the foreseeable future. And this is cyclical. It's a pattern. It's happened multiple times throughout history, and long before history as well. These are things that come around, and Um, we've gone through dark ages and dark times multiple times already. And these are things that we can navigate, and we can create foundations and communities to preserve human experiences and to nurture it and to develop it. And, of course, to help spread that when the time is right. But where this is going, I don't know. All I can do is take care of myself and work on my own practice and help people in whatever capacity I have.
That's awesome, Julian. And like, I encourage everybody to go to your website. We'll have that in the link below. But I just commend you for bringing somebody and having that ability and, sacrificing of yourself to help people in this therapeutic approach. And, as we said before, that sacred return. And for you to be a part of that, it's such a privilege.
Thank you.
It's so awesome. Yeah. And it's such a high calling.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if I sacrifice myself to help anybody. Um, I try to be very conscious of that right there. But just doing, working on myself so much, working through my own trauma, working through all my own pain, it really put me in a unique position to really be able to share this with other people. So I'm very grateful for all the pains and for all the difficulties that I've navigated and endured. It's put me in a very unique position to go deeper with it and also to help other people go through it. So it's a wonderful experience.
Thank you, Julian.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason.